Hey, what's up? I'm back. Now, you may be wondering where I've been. Well, let's just say I've been working on something very important for the last few months. It's called comedycalendar.com. Not going to plug it in too much, but I just want to let you know that there is now a comedy directory that can be used in all major cities in the USA. So if you ever want to go out to a comedy show, go to comedycalendar.com and then you can see why I wasn't able to do a comedy coach podcast the last month and a half or so. But it's good to be back, and I already made out a new video for you guys. I put out a video regarding what it's like to be an independent comedian. So let's go ahead and make that the theme for this podcast. You know, I've decided. I remember one day I woke up. I was like in 2016, and I woke up and I realized, why do I need to drive 3 to 5 hours to go do 5 minutes in another city? Because in South Florida, there wasn't really much of a comedy scene here. And so I had to go to cities really far away to go up on a nightly basis. You know, I'd have to perform in West Palm Beach and Marco Island and Lake Worth and, kind of get to know the quote unquote comedy scene in those cities at the time. And yeah, one day I just woke up and I realized, why is it that I got to go and drive all the way there, put my name on a list? Sometimes I wouldn't even go up, and I would have to drive all the way back without there being a reason to have made the drive in the first place, right? Because let's say like somebody came with the band, and then the band started playing, and then the host said, well, they're doing a good job. You got to keep them, keep playing, or so. Yeah, I mean, there was just a lot of obstacles for me to get stage time. And it was one of the many reasons as to how I made MiamiComedy.com become a place to build a comedy scene. And when that started picking up and I was no longer driving to these other cities for stage time, I realized how social media was changing careers like overnight. I saw a lot of comedians really have something as simple as a 30 to 60-second clip defining their entire career. And it's fascinating to see because that's the power of social media. It can make your career in just one video, and you can go viral on a particular niche or a particular joke, and you're on tour. And this is why becoming an independent comedian or understanding where you can go in your comedy career with this idea, it's because there's unlimited possibilities now. And because success is deemed to be someone that has a lot of followers or is famous or has a lot of money, because success is labeled as that, especially when it comes to being an entertainer, a lot of comedians then feel like they are not capable of being comedians or true ones because it has to go through that you are a success based on modern confirmations, right? So people think like if you go viral, you're a real comedian, or if you're on tour, or if you've got a Netflix special, you're a real comedian, or if you've got a podcast with a lot of listeners, you're a real comedian. And so the same way that social media has given people the opportunity to become popular in the comedy industry is the same way that social media can take away from your ability of being a comedian, because there's a lot of obstacles involved. And it could be something like trying to get booked somewhere, or trying to produce a show, or even an algorithm preventing you from distributing your content because it doesn't like what you posted or whatever. And so all these things become what prevents comedians from wanting to even pursue the dream. And in 2016, when I woke up and just had this insight of just being as independent as possible, every single thing that becomes a gatekeeper, whether it be a person or a bot, became extremely apparent to me. Where, okay, this is going to be something that's going to prevent me from distributing my sense of humor to people. This is the algorithm, or this booker is giving me a hard time, or whatever. I mean, there's so many factors when it comes to what they call quote unquote gatekeepers. But the worst one that you can do is comparing your success to someone else's, because success is subjective. Of course it is. I mean, somebody that has a family is considered a success in their own way, and somebody that has a great career is considered a success in their own way, or somebody that travels or achieved a certain balance in their bank account, whatever it may be, it's all subjective. But if you ever compare your comedy career to someone else's, that is probably the worst way of ever becoming a fully independent comedian, because there will always be another performer better. And when you become an independent comedian, you need to realize all the things that are gatekeepers. But to take it to another level, you need to realize that you could be your own gatekeeper as well. Because if you look at your followers and you say, well, I don't have as many followers as this person, or I'm not on a Netflix special like this other person, or whatever you compare yourself as, it's just you being your own gatekeeper instead of finding your own path. And so what's happening now is that there's so many opportunities in any industry. But if we're going to focus on the comedy career one, the gatekeepers have always been there. And now they don't have to be there. But we've convinced ourselves that they are, because of what society deems as what is a real successful comedian in the first place. But there are so many different paths that you can take, that you can not even take, create for yourself. Because gatekeepers in the comedy industry, they're kind of like these trolls, right? Like they're just like in the way. And they know how much you want that dream. They know how much you want to make it. And then they use that to their advantage. And if you are a good comedian, and this is, of course, if you're talented. I'm not talking about the ones that, just start an open mic and think they deserve, all the stage time. I'm talking about like, all right, you've worked on your act, you're really good, and you start to see the friction where these gatekeepers are getting in the way. They kind of just like see where you are, see what you want, see where your next level is, and they don't want you to go there. And they see that they have the ability to, either give it to you or take it away. And then, that kind of turns them on a little bit. You know what I mean? And if you're a really talented comedian and you have the means to make people laugh, you need to realize that there needs to be as little middlemen as possible between you and that audience. I mean, if you really think about it, when you make people laugh, it's you and the person laughing. But if people try to get in between that, they're going to try to use that to their advantage to, get their own personal gain based on the dream that you want to achieve. And so a real independent comedian notices this and tries to minimize that as much as possible. And there will always be things in between you and your goals. I mean, that's what makes them goals. You have to take the necessary steps and all the hurdles in order to achieve it. But there's different paths, and it doesn't necessarily have to be just one way, or it's not possible. And there's so many ways to consider on how to do this. The first one that comes to mind is you have to be undeniable, right? That's something that I've always agreed with. Like, become so good that you're undeniable. And that goes to the way you perform, the value that you create. Well, let's go down that route a little bit. When you're a comedian, you need to find all the ways that you can create value. It can't just be like, oh, I'm funny, or I make people laugh. I mean, what differentiates you from another comedian that can make people laugh? And then you just become a dime a dozen if that's the only value. But if you can create other forms of value that not a lot of comedians are involved in, then you become more valuable. So, for example, there's some comedians that make money off copywriting or selling a very particular meme-worthy merch, or a comedian that works specifically for hosting weddings or church events. And they find their niche because they're talented, they can make the people laugh, and there's not a lot of other comedians in that space. So that's the first one. Become undeniable by creating value in a place that you can elevate the industry into, but with your talents, with your own personality, and with your creativity. Another way that comes to mind on how to be a more independent comedian is, what is the platform that you can build for yourself in order for other people to have a laugh? And it doesn't necessarily have to be where your face and name is the reason why. I mean, it could be the reason why, but it doesn't have to be the only way. You can do it where, let's say you do a podcast where you interview a particular industry of people, let's say like truck drivers, and then you got your truck driver niche. Or if you've got a very funny uncle that is really into the Italian culture, and you have him as a co-host, and then you as a comedian portray what it's like to live in an Italian family, and you've got that going for you. Or you start a YouTube channel or whatever. I mean, there's so many different ways to deliver value in a way that's different from the comedian, where you've got your own niche. And that platform becomes the multiplier of the value creation. And if you can make more than one, even better. However, don't overwhelm yourself. Do one at a time if you're getting started. And it could be like a podcast, it could be a YouTube, it could be a video series on Instagram, or you could just split it into all those mediums and then have your audience multiply. But again, you don't want to like overdo it to the point where it's so much work that you can't keep up. Do it wherever you feel comfortable and where your time allows you, and try to grow that. And once you build this platform, that becomes your distribution channel outside of a particular person. Now, in this case, the gatekeeper is, will the algorithm push it? Will one algorithm do better than the other? If you do monetize in one, they can take it away the next day because of whatever reason. And, that's a whole nother podcast. But this is an example of what it's like to create value by building your own platform, by going into niches that are underserved. Another way to become an independent comedian is just learn entrepreneurship, learn what it's like to create products and services and how to market it to people, how to negotiate. Because if you're a really good business person, you can see value and you can create value, and you can see the opportunities and you can create the opportunities. You become more savvy in that world when it comes to understanding entrepreneurship. And I know that there's a lot of comedians out there, they're rebellious and they're artists and they're anti-business or whatever, but those days are over, because now you have to be your own boss. And an effective boss is actually a leader. And if you're a leader, you can lead your career to become wherever or whatever it is you want. So keep that in mind. Entrepreneurship is a great way to become an independent comedian. All right, so with that being said, my favorite segment of these podcasts is asking AI to send me a few emails to show you an example of how this can apply into your comedy career. So in this case, this email is one I got by recording this podcast live, and then AI sends me this email, and the subject is, I didn't expect to relate to this. Hey Manny, I watched your clip about independent comedy careers. I just posted it. Damn, that was fast. And honestly, I didn't expect it to hit me the way it did. I'm a club booker. I've been on the other side of the gatekeeper dynamic for years, and I never thought about how much power comics assume I have over their trajectory. What hit me wasn't the criticism of the middlemen. It was the idea that if someone's dream can be blocked by one person, it becomes a hostage situation. That was well said. I've seen comics treat my approval like oxygen. And I've also seen the ones who don't need it. The ones who build their own audience, bring people in, create demand. Those are the comics I end up respecting the most. Your point about removing dependency made me rethink my own position too. I don't want to be someone's ceiling. I'd rather be a stop along the way. It made me ask myself whether I'm helping comics build leverage or just rewarding the ones who already have it. Appreciate the perspective. Mark. All right, Mark, you know what? As a comedy club booker, you seem to be very self-aware and knowing the responsibility of the power you have. Now, you're in a different position because you are the one that provides the platform to the comedian. And believe me, man, as someone that books shows, there's a lot of comedians out there that think they deserve it all for absolutely no reason. They don't bring anybody. They don't buy drinks or support the venue. They just say, I'm hilarious, give me stage time, right? I know those. However, I've also known bookers or producers or club owners that think that they are, the king of everyone's comedy career that steps through their doors. You don't seem to be that kind of person. However, this is the case in a lot of comedians' lives, where that one guy is kind of a jerk, and you kind of have to get their approval, and maybe he doesn't ever give it to you, and you got to chase it forever, and then that becomes a wall into achieving your dreams. But in your case, like they say, with great power comes great responsibility. Even if it's somebody that makes you do a 2 drink minimum and offers chicken wings, right? That's powerful, and especially if you're hungry and you're looking for a drink and be entertained, right? You could provide that, and you got to be a little stricter with these comics. You got to make sure that they don't take advantage and that they know their position and your position, and treat them with respect and expect to be treated with respect. And then, that dynamic between the performer and the owner, in order for there to be a harmony between someone getting stage time and someone running a business in order for the person to get stage time. So in your case, man, just make sure that you keep that responsibility going. You hit your numbers. You don't take advantage of people. You don't let your ego get in the way, and you become a leader, which it sounds like you already are. And you'll see your business grow and prosper, because you're building a community of comedians that like to perform at your venue and also support your venue based on your expectations. All right, there you go. Email number 2, growing a podcast on YouTube. Subject: I've been waiting for permission. Hey, Manny, I've been building a podcast with YouTube for about a year now, and your clip kind of called me out in a good way. I realized I've been subconsciously waiting for some big validation moment, a shout out, a viral clip, a bigger sign from someone bigger than me. When you said we confuse loud with successful, that kind of stuck to me. I've been measuring my progress against views and follower counts instead of whether I'm actually getting better and connecting with the audience I already have. The hostage situation line hit too. I've definitely felt like my dream depends on the algorithm deciding if this is worthy of a work, to showcase. But hearing you talk about building more doors instead of knocking on one, hold on, let me read this again. But hearing you talk about building more doors instead of knocking on one gave me a shift. I don't need to be picked. I need to keep building distribution. It made the whole thing feel less fragile. Thanks a lot, Alicia. All right, Alicia. Yeah, so congratulations on your podcast and for being consistent for a year. I know podcasting is very difficult to do, especially when it comes to doing it over and over. So shout out for doing a great job. Now, I know that algorithms are the new gatekeepers when it comes to entertainment. And it kind of feels like you're in a relationship with an algorithm, right? Like one day your algorithm loves your work, says, good job, let me distribute this one and show it to everybody. And then the next day it doesn't even acknowledge you. Says, no, I'm not talking to you today. I don't care what you post. Doesn't it feel like that sometimes? Like you're in a toxic relationship with the algorithm? And that's just the way it is. There's certain trends that come and that they go, and algorithm favors one thing over the other, whatever. However, being consistent is always undeniable. Like if you do something for a prolonged period of time, something within that consistency allows you to then multiply it into the next thing. Like only one episode needs to pop in order for the rest to then be the same way. And another thing that I've realized when it comes to algorithms is a lot of them give you insights like metrics and stuff, and they can be really good at showing you what your audience wants on the DL, but you got to be really good at reading that, and you got to go into the nuances and the details of all that. But look at your metrics. Look at what is engaging, what isn't engaging, what works, what doesn't work. And you can even see if there's a similar podcast or a similar episode out there that someone else has made that has worked very well, and then just make it your own, right? Like a certain topic, right? Like if you do a podcast about comedians playing guitar, you go online and see if there's another podcast, and you kind of get the gist of it, and then you do it your own way. through your own lens, because most of the time it's because some people are searching that thing specifically and no one would know that that was that popular, right? But that person did because it shows you that it works. And then you can also see based on your consistency what has worked that you've done before and see if there's any trends. Like, let's say you do a podcast episode today, but then 6 weeks from now, that podcast episode suddenly becomes a little more popular, and then you can kind of get a feel for these trends and how it works and how you can make one content into many, that kind of stuff. So yeah, the algorithm can be a gatekeeper. There's no one else to blame except a bot somewhere and somebody tweaking that bot. But consistency is one of the best ways to gain more insights from the metrics. All right. Email 3. Comparing myself to another comedian. I've been doing stand-up for 5 years, and I've been stuck in comparison mode for at least 3 of them. There's a guy I started who just got passed at a bigger club and is touring with a headliner, and I've been measuring my entire self-worth against his timeline. When you said, if you're waiting for a big break, that's not a comedy career, that's a gambling career, I laughed and felt slightly attacked. I think I've been gambling. I've been hoping something external validates me instead of building something I can actually control. The part about comedians quietly making money and sleeping peacefully made me uncomfortable because I realized I don't even know what success looks like for me. I just know what it looks like for them. I've been bottlenecking my dream into someone else's definition of quote unquote made it. Your clip made me rethink what I'm actually trying to build. I appreciate any feedback. Daniel. All right, Daniel. So this goes into finding ways to create value for yourself and for others as a comedian. And if you go into comparison mode, you're pretty much just stopping that from happening because you will only create based on that standard. So let's say you've been doing something for a certain amount of time, you've been hitting mics, you've been writing, you've been creating content, and a buddy of yours was doing the same thing at the same time, and then he or she gets chosen, goes on the road, and becomes an opener for a famous comedian, and you're still here stuck doing the same thing. Instead of comparing what you're doing to what that person did in order to gain success, you instead should find ways where your current habit or what works for you now can be evolved into something more valuable. And make sure that it's something that you're passionate about, because you can be passionate about doing stand-up comedy, but if you go a little deeper, you may realize that you're also passionate about writing. And you'll realize that there's people out there that want creative slogans and creative copy for their website. And you can be the kind of person that tweaks it and maybe even find a system on how to do it very well with AI, whatever. I'm just spitballing here, but I'm just giving you many examples on where you can take your talents to another level if you just stop putting yourself in a position where there's a standard based on something you don't have control over. So just dig a little deeper, experiment, find all the ways that you can create value and become valuable yourself. Because if you're undeniably funny, and all you got to do is just multiply that in different ways, other than just the way you've been doing it, you'll realize that there are many more paths to become successful. And hey, you never know, maybe even more successful than your buddy there. All right, just saying. So once again, guys, becoming an independent comedian, there's a lot of factors involved. There's many ways to do it. I would even say there's an unlimited ways to do it. But these are just some of the examples that I can come up with based on where I'm at in my comedy career. But I can guarantee you right now that this moment in time is probably one of the best ways to become an independent comedian, because there's so many ways that you can create your own opportunities. And there's so many tools out there, and there's so many ways to self-develop yourself and become a better person and just funnier overall in many ways, in more than one. So keep that in mind. Anybody can become a comedian. Just stop comparing yourself. Keep in mind and be aware of all the gatekeepers that get in the way, and realize that there's more than one path to becoming successful. And it's good to be back podcasting. I'm glad that I see that the podcast itself's got some listeners. Shout out to all the people that listen. Thank you very much. If you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're on Spotify, leave a review. All that good stuff. Subscribe, like, comment, all that stuff that makes me look like I'm successful based on current and modern standards. Okay. And yeah, and once again, the reason why I took a little hiatus on this is because I just finished coding this thing. ComedyCalendar.com, a directory for live comedy shows all over the United States. If you're ever going to buy a ticket, just look up your city or look up the comedian and track their tour dates and hit the little affiliate link there. Get yourself a ticket. No extra cost. I got a little kickback, and it's a win-win for everybody. All right. Thanks for tuning in to the Comedy Coach podcast. I look forward to doing these more often like I used to. I'll see you on the next episode.